Are you interested in getting into the rental market in Montreal? Have you had a lot of questions about how the laws work, what to know, what the prices look like, what different neighborhoods in Montreal have to offer you? Well, my name is LJ Aguinaga, your local real estate expert here with LJ Realties. And in this video, I'm going to break down a lot of these different points for you. So we're going to talk about some of the laws. We're going to talk about what's happening in the Montreal market today. We're going to talk about the island of Montreal and surrounding areas to know what's important, what we look for different rentals, why it might actually have an impact on your decision. Then we're going to talk about what a healthy budget is going to look like for you when you're looking for a rental in this market. And finally, we're going to touch on some points for what to know if you're a newcomer to Canada and what might actually work in your advantage or disadvantage. So without any further ado, I'm going to jump right into this. Starting off with rental laws in Quebec. So the first question a lot of people have, especially if you've never rented a property in Quebec before, it's what kind of forms do we need to use? And luckily in Quebec, it's actually quite straightforward. We only have one residential rental form. It's the standard lease form of Quebec. You have it in French and in English, but that is the only form that any residential lease in Quebec should be completed on. You can go to your local pharmacy to pick up a copy of it, and there's a couple of other retailers, but effectively they're on sale for I think $1.99, and you can pick it up from there. There's also a couple of online versions from a few wholesalers, if you will, so feel free to look into that if you have questions about it. Now, the next question that typically comes up is, what does a term look like on a rental in Montreal? And there's two types of terms. We have a fixed term and we have an indeterminate term. The most common term in Quebec is the 12-month or the 1-year term. That's what we see most commonly. However, you could opt for a 2-year lease or even a 3-year lease, and sometimes in that case, you're going to see some rental increases baked into it, or in other cases, you won't see any increases baked into it, and it'll just be a set fee for that entire time. Now, if you do go the indeterminate route, that's a month-to-month lease, if you will. There's pros and cons to both. Depending on what type of lease that you're on, we're going to see in some scenarios that the time requirements in order to give a rental increase, in order to repossess or stuff of that nature is going to change. So it's very important to know what kind of lease you're on, what's the duration of that. The last type of lease that we have in Quebec is the verbal lease. Now, I don't recommend this for anybody. However, if you do have a verbal lease, if you have been living somewhere, you're paying X amount of rent and you continue to live there, that is still a valid lease. And a lot of times in Quebec, people think like, oh, there's no lease, it doesn't exist, it doesn't matter. No. If somebody is paying rent for a property and they've been living there and they just have a verbal lease, that still counts and that is still legally upheld, if you will. So it is super important to understand the different types of leases, but they are all valid. The next important point for the law section is rent control. Quebec is very much a rent-controlled province, and there's pros and cons to this, obviously. If you're a tenant or if you're a landlord, you have different opinions on this. But the reality is the rent control is there to help maintain a consistent growth across the board and ensure that prices of rentals are not going up too quickly. There's a couple of exceptions to this. So if property was built in the last 5 years, there is no rent control on that building. As of 2024, there is an addition to the law stating that you have to advise any tenant of what the maximum rent that you're going to charge them over that 5-year period is going to be. However, it is still not rent controlled. It's simply a notice that you have to give the tenants. The next thing is, how much can you increase rents? Well, that changes every single year, believe it or not. A lot of times people talk about a 2 to 3% increase per year, and that has been the case in some years, but that's not the reality for every single year. This year, 2025, for example, the rental increase amount is 5.9%, which is a huge amount. This is the largest amount that I've seen since I've been a landlord, but it changes every single year. You have to go onto the rental board's website, the TAL website, and use their rental calculator in order to find out how much you're actually eligible to increase. We're doing the calculation for some of our units just this week, and we saw 7%, 8% because that 5.9% that I just mentioned is the minimum if you haven't done any work to the property. But if you've done work or improvements to the property, that number is going to continue to grow with that. As a tenant, it is your right to ask the landlord for copies of the receipts to make sure the calculation is done fairly and there's no funny business happening in there. The most common thing for landlords to do is to use this actual calculator in order to avoid having to go to the rental board unnecessarily. So if they do provide you with the calculation and they provide you with the receipts for it all, I recommend that as a tenant, you don't try and contest it because you're not going to win it. And unfortunately, you're going to have to pay for the legal fees associated to it as well, which is the case opening, anything of that nature. But if the landlord is not providing you with this information, he's trying to do things a little bit more mischievously or mysteriously, both words apply here, then feel free to ask for that information and get those documents before agreeing to a rental increase. The third subject on rental laws that I want to discuss is the security deposit. We spoke about this on air on Under One Roof a couple weeks ago, and this is a subject that comes up time and time again. The idea of a security deposit required by a landlord is illegal in the province of Quebec. Now, just because something's illegal doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Going over 100 kilometers per hour on the highway is illegal. People do it all the time. The reality is Some landlords still request this and they pretend like they require it, and they actually will even go as far as not renting to somebody who's not willing to pay it out, but that is an illegal practice. Now, in some cases, I have seen tenants voluntarily offer a security deposit. And why would they do this? Well, there's two reasons. First of all, they might not have great credit. Second of all, they might have bad references. Third of all, they may have just arrived into Canada, so they have no credit at all, no references, and there's no way for a landlord to confirm that they're actually a good payer, they have good payment habits, and they're going to make a good tenant. In these scenarios, a tenant is welcome to offer a security deposit in order to strengthen their application because they understand that there's no strength to their current application. But a landlord cannot require one by law. That is illegal, and the tenant does have the right to simply not pay that, not move forward on that front. So that is an important point to distinguish between Quebec and a lot of other provinces in Canada that do allow security deposits. So this is a huge point to note, and it's a point that comes up time and time again. The next subject I want to cover here is evictions and lease terminations. Well, starting off with evictions. An eviction can realistically only happen in Quebec if the tenant is not paying, or if the tenant is causing a prejudice to other inhabitants of the building, therefore causing trouble in the building. We can also do what's called a lease termination, or more so a repossession, for a couple of specific cases that are provisions in the Civil Code of Quebec. The first one for repossession is if you own a unit and you want to move back into that unit yourself, then you are allowed to send a notice to the tenant 6 months prior to lease end and state that you will be repossessing the unit for your own occupancy at the end of their current lease. You can do this as well if you want to move in a parent into a unit or if you want to move in a child into a unit. Siblings do not apply to this law, so it's very important to understand that it's for yourself, up or down. The next thing that we have in terms of a repossession is you can repossess a unit because you want to do major renovations to the building. Now, it can't just be that you want to paint it up a little bit, but a lot of the times this is going to come down to if you own a full building and you want to combine units or you want to separate units, so you want to make major changes, so substantially subdivide or substantially increase the size of a unit, then you'd be able to go down that road as well. So these are really the only cases. If it's not one of these cases, technically speaking, a tenant always has the right to renew a lease. So this is super important to understand. You are always entitled to renew your lease unless it falls into one of these categories that I just discussed. Next up in the law section, we have tenant rights. And the first right, which is the most important one, is that you as a tenant have the right to the peaceful enjoyment of your property. And what I mean by this is that you're entitled to live in your space and not feel that you're in danger and not feel like there's noise blasting at the late hours and you can't sleep and can't actually enjoy your place to the fullest. Now, obviously, if the landlord owns the entire building, think of a duplex, triplex, etc., it's a lot easier for him to mitigate this. He has direct contact to the other tenants or to whoever else is occupying the property, and it becomes a little bit easier. If you are renting in a condo tower and your landlord does not own all of the units in the condo tower, which is quite common, then it becomes a lot more difficult to manage. He will go to the condo board, he will go to the syndicate, he will try and mitigate this, but obviously it becomes a bit more difficult to manage, and you have to keep that in mind. And it's one of the advantages or disadvantages to living in a larger building versus a smaller building. The next thing is that you are entitled to your privacy. What this means is that the landlord cannot just enter your property at any point in time with no notice just because he feels like it. If there is an emergency going on, let's say there's a leak from your unit going into another one or from another one going into your unit, then yes, obviously they have access to the unit to try and help mitigate the damage and control the damage happening in the situation. But if it isn't an emergency, the landlord has to give you a minimum of 24-hour notice in order to enter the apartment. Now, you do have to be flexible here and obviously give them the right if they're coming in with a contractor, if there's something going on, if they want to do visits because you've said that you're not going to renew. But this is one of the rights that you're entitled to. The next thing, obviously, is we have strong discrimination laws. If you feel that you've been the victim to discrimination, feel free to contact the competent authorities to make a complaint and state that you felt that this was discrimination for XYZ reasons. If there were multiple applications on property and somebody's credit seemed better or something else like that happened, then the landlord is entitled to decide which candidate they want to choose based on the verification of things, obviously. But if you do feel that you've gone through discrimination, please reach out to the competent authorities to report these people and avoid this happening in the future to somebody else. The next law that comes up a lot is the question of subletting versus lease transfers. And there have been some changes to this, but nevertheless, it's something that comes up year after year. To sublet your apartment means that you are still responsible for the lease itself, and you simply are going to be going away for a year, for two, and you have somebody else occupying the property on your behalf. Typically speaking, you're going to have that person occupy, and they will typically be paying you rent, and then you're going to be paying your landlord rent, but you've simply advised the landlord that you're not the person occupying the unit right now, so in case anything comes up, to reach out to this other person. You still maintain responsibility for the unit, though, so if anything goes wrong, it's your responsibility. The next is called a lease transfer, or a lease assignment. When we do this, you are completely transferring the responsibility to the other person. Now, with the recent law change last year, the landlord is entitled to refuse a lease transfer with no reason and simply state, I want to take back the unit. I'm going to go and paint it. I'm going to go and renovate it. I'm going to go to do whatever I want with my unit. That's it. That's all. You are off the hook as of the date that you have requested, but I'm going to take back this unit. They're also entitled to accept your lease transfer and do a verification on this person. So the landlord could ask to do the exact same verification to this new tenant that they did to you. You might have to pay a fee associated doing this verification, and there might be a management fee associated to it. Now, it can't be exorbitant, but you can expect to pay somewhere between $50 to $200 for this transfer to manage this transfer in itself. This is quite common, and a lot more people are doing it because it is work to do a lease transfer. There's a couple of documents that have to go into it. There's a background verification, etc. A lot of time, landlords are going to outsource this to a management company or to a credit verification specialist, so there are some fees associated to this. So that pretty well wraps up my Montreal rental laws section. Now we're about to dive into what's going on in the Montreal market. And the reality is the Montreal market is off to a hot start, as per usual. We are very much in the thick of things, and I would say that the months of April through June are always the hottest rental months because the busiest rental month of the year is always a July 1st move. And in order to have a July 1st move, well, you have to coordinate it typically a couple of months before that. So that's why we see right now we're in the thick of things, if you will. Now, a lot of times people will ask me, LJ, what are the busiest moving dates of Montreal? And there's 4 in Montreal. I'll break them down for you right now. The first one, July 1st, I just mentioned to you. The second one is September 1st. That's because we see a lot of people start new employment on September 1st. A lot of people start school for September 1st. So we have that as a big trigger date. The next one is May 1st. And May 1st is because of our large universities in Montreal. We have 4 major universities. And thus, a lot of time, tenants want to have a May 1st to April 30th because they finish exams in the month of April. And once they graduate, they want to roll right off and not have to worry about an extra month or two of managing a rental situation. The fourth and final date is the January 1st date. That's another super important date in the Montreal rental market. So if you are trying to move, those are the 4 best months to move, in my opinion. Now, I say best kind of sparingly for July 1st because it's also one of the most expensive months to move. And the reason for that is the fact that because so many people are moving companies are quite booked, and transferring your utilities is sometimes difficult because, again, there's just so much action going on for that date that it becomes more and more difficult to manage. Circling back to what's actually happening in the Montreal real estate market right now, well, like I mentioned before, that 5.9% increase in the allowable rent has caused a lot of tenants to start considering a move potentially. So you have a lot of people reaching out to the market, seeing what's happening. Some people went straight ahead and they said, I'm not renewing my lease and now have to find a new place. But the reality is we still have very, very low vacancy rates. Last I checked, we were at about 2.1%, which is super low, which means that there's not a lot of available apartments. What happens when there's not a lot of supply in the market? Well, classic supply and demand, we're going to see prices go up. Beyond that, on the sale side or on the purchasing side, we've seen that interest rates have come back down. With interest rates coming back down a little bit, we've seen sale prices start to go up again. So when we see that happen, well, the inverse effect is going to happen with your rental prices. Rental prices are going to follow that and they're going to go up because landlords need higher rental prices to cover the higher costs of carrying these properties. So right now what we're seeing in the market is that rental prices are up, and I've even seen landlords for the first time ever not go for the full increase amount. If they already had their tenants paying kind of fair market value or the top end of the market, a lot of the landlords said, you know what, I want to keep these good tenants. I'm not going to increase them by the full 5.9 or even more percent. I'm going to increase them by a reduced amount in order to keep them and not have to pay a fee to potentially find a new tenant or deal with the hassle, etc. So keep that in mind when you're looking or deciding if you're going to be looking for a new rental because it's not super easy out there right now. A lot of people are struggling to find solid housing. So right now we're going to segue into what certain rentals cost on the market right now. I'm going to showcase a couple different properties that my team actually has listed right now to show you what the pricing looks like and give you different economics on what's happening in the Montreal market as a whole. Over here, we have all of our active listings right now in the Montreal area. So you can see that our prices currently range from $1,400 a month all the way to $3,000 a month, and we have everything in between right now. So let's start off with this one that I have on Cardinal, for example. So this is a large 1-bedroom apartment that we have in Villemard right now. We're in the Côte St. Paul area. This gives you an idea of some of the photos. We're asking $1,400 for this unit right now. I'm going to cycle through a couple of these photos. You can see it's a pretty large unit. The bedroom itself is actually tucked away behind this wall over here. So it's a nice little bedroom setup. You've got a gas fireplace, which is a nice touch. It's cozy. It's nice to enjoy, obviously. Decent sized kitchen, good sized dining room over here. And this is the bathroom back over here. So nice little unit, some nice windows. You have a solid balcony that you're going to see in a couple photos here. So not super new by any means, but super clean, super well maintained. And this is the balcony that you have up here, which is a nice touch as well. So this is what you can get right now for a one bedroom, $1,400 in the Côte Saint Paul area. Moving on, we have this other one bedroom for $1,500 on Désirable, and now we're in the Plateau. So obviously Plateau is typically a little bit more of an expensive neighborhood. Gives you context of what we can find there. We've got an accepted offer on this unit, but this was a unit in the Hochelaga area. This was asking $1,595, and this is actually a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom. So you can see different areas are commanding different prices a little bit. I'm actually going to put this into map view now to give you an idea over here, and we can start clicking through some of these other areas. So let's bring you now into the triangle. So this part is Côte de Neige. This is a much newer building. Obviously, we have a 2014 construction here, 1,077 square feet, and this one actually comes with an indoor garage as well. So parking does play a role in the valuations as well. It's a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom with a balcony as well. So a lot nicer compared to some of the other units that we just saw. But now we're at $2,600 a month. So we can see a huge jump, obviously, in pricing. And then I'll cycle through some photos here. So nice unit, nice hardwood floors, nice balcony, like I mentioned. You've got the bedrooms on 2 opposite sides, which is a nice touch because that means that you can have a bit more privacy, even if you're living with a roommate. And we have the 2 bathrooms. So one of them is going to be an ensuite bathroom, so connected to the primary bedroom. And the second bathroom is going to be in the common area, so available for the second bedroom and then also available for any guests who are at the apartment and whatnot. So you can see it's a really nice unit, obviously, and that's why the asking rent is now $2,600 on this unit. It's in a great location. You're close to the highways. You're close to DeCarry, the 40, which gives you good access to downtown. You're super close to De La Savane Metro, which is right over here, and even more Metro is right over here. So you're kind of sandwiched between the two of them. And this is in the area that's called the Triangle, which is a nice little area that was built in this triangular shape. And you've got all new constructions in that area. So a nice little project to check out. This building also has a little indoor gym, which is a nice touch as well if you want to work out and you want to save on your rental membership for anything online. If we go over here, let's see, we've got this unit on Saint Denis. This is also in the Plateau, and this is $1,700 for a 530 square foot, 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom. But what makes this unit unique is that this is a fully furnished unit. So this comes with your fridge, with your stove, dishwasher, as well as all the furnishings. So bedding, couches, tables, all that kind of stuff. So it's a really cool unit that is available. We've rented this typically to a student in the past. So we've had a couple students who rented this and they're super comfortable in there. It's a nice unit. It's well maintained. It's also in a newer building, 2016 in this case, on Saint Denis, but it kind of faces towards the back for the most part. And you've got a nice little private backyard, courtyard situation happening. So this gives you a bit of an idea of some of the different prices. And then I want to take us now to the unit that I have here at $3,000 a month. So here we are at 4093 Rue Acres. And you're going to see this is a beautiful single-family home located in Pierrefonds. It's a 3+1 bedroom, 1+1 bathroom. It's got a garage, 2 driveway spots. It's located in a great family-friendly area. You've got excellent schools around here. You've got lots of parks. You can see everything green on the map here is a park that's available to you. So it's a solid house, actually, and it's pretty close to Fairview, Pointe-Claire, which is the main shopping center. It's where the future REM station is going to be as well. So very well-located property, which is great for any families. So we can go through this, and I'll show you some of the photos to show you what you can get for this value. So kitchen's been renovated. Nice windows as well, in good condition. They've been changed. The floors have been redone as well. You've got a nice bay window at the front there. Here we have some virtual staging showcasing the dining rooms, the living room area. You've got 3 bedrooms up here as well, which is super great for any family. The classic family orientation is going to be kind of the parents, 2 kids. Or if you just have 1 kid and want to have a work from home space, you can have an office up here as well. But the beauty of this being a bungalow is that you have a full basement available to you as well. So that's where the price comes in. You also have the backyard. So you have a dog or you have pets and whatnot, and you want that backyard space or even just for your family. Great for entertaining, hosting, barbecues, all that good stuff. So that's why we're at $3,000 a month here. Apartments in the West Island now are 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom is going to be $2,500, $2,700. So if that's what an apartment value is at, you can obviously understand why a house is going to be at $3,000 a month. And this, again, I'm just cycling through the photos here to give you a bit more of an idea of what it looks like and what you're getting for your money in a property of this. This is the backyard, so lots of space back there, which is great for any family, realistically. Now, let's look at some of the other rentals that we have. I know we just listed a property in Candiac not so long ago, so here. You're going to see this is a townhouse-style apartment, if you will. This property is on 2 floors. You got the ground floor and the second floor. And let's showcase what we have here. So, beautiful setup. Nice modern construction, newer kitchen. You know, everything's clean. Everything's well maintained on this property, which is awesome. Candiac's in the South Shore. It's a completely different neighborhood of Montreal, but there's a lot of people moving out there because you're getting great value. You're getting larger properties, obviously, for a reduced price. But again, this aligns with what I mentioned, even in the West Island, similar pricing based on the amount of property. So garage on this property as well. You actually have 2 parking spots in this one, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah. Now, it's a solid setup over here. And then what's great is that you're close to highways here. So we can kind of access the 30, we can access the 15. You've got access to different things, obviously. And then to put into context, if you're unfamiliar, Candiac is over here, Montreal is over here. The downtown area is right around here. The West Island that I was showing you before was over here in Pierrefonds, and then kind of all of this encompassing makes up the West Island. We've got Laval up here, which is a similar market to the West Island and even to the South Shore that we're seeing. And then downtown's a little bit different, which we saw in some of the pricing that we saw a few minutes ago. So that gives you a bit of an idea of what your money's going to be able to get you in different parts of Montreal. If you have more questions on that, or if you want a few more comparables, feel free to mention it in the comments down below. I'd be more than happy to send you information on anything like this directly. Now, the fourth point I was going to talk about is what is a healthy rental budget in Montreal? So obviously this depends on how much space you need and where you want to be located. I would say that if you want to be in a modern apartment in downtown Montreal, a 1-bedroom is going to start running you between $1,800 to $2,000. That's kind of what we're seeing nowadays. Especially if you need parking, you're going to be at that $2,000 mark. If you want a 2-bedroom, well, now we're going to be in that $2,500 to $3,000 mark. And 3 bedrooms and above, you're going to be at $3,000 plus. If you are looking to be in the West Island, well, 1-bedrooms are probably going to be in the range of $1,200 to kind of $1,500. And then 2 bedrooms are going to be in that $1,800 to $2,500, really depending on how modern, how many amenities you have, parking, etc. And then it's kind of going to go from there. And then houses, obviously, again, really dependent on the location. West Island, I just showed you a house for $3,000 available right now. And that's kind of what they're trading for. I looked at a couple comparables before we listed that property. If you're looking for a house in the city, I've seen houses rent for $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. It really depends on the size of the house and what neighborhood it's located in, because some of our more prestigious neighborhoods like Westmount are going to command a premium for a rental. And obviously, as we get further away from the downtown core, it'll get closer to that $2,000 to $3,000 range. So it really depends on what you're looking for. But I would say that to get into a rental in Montreal nowadays, you're probably looking at a minimum of $1,500 to $2,000, depending on the type of property. That should be really your minimum threshold these days, is the reality of the market. Now, as promised, what can you do as a newcomer to Canada to make your application stand out and make sure you get your rental? Well, there's a couple different things, and it starts way before you might think it is. The first thing you can do is have good communication skills. So when you're booking the appointment, whether that's over the phone or whether that's through email, make sure that you're polite, that you're courteous, that you confirm specific times. And then the day before your appointment, or even the morning of your appointment, send a follow-up text message or email confirming, hey, I just want to make sure that I'm going to see you today at X time at X address, to show the person that you're serious and that you follow up and that you have great communication skills. The next thing is make sure that you show up on time. People who don't show up on time, at least to me, is a huge red flag. Part of the rental is obviously going to be the credit and all that application, which we're going to talk about in a second. But to me, the most important part of accepting a tenant, it typically comes down to the gut check or the sense check, or even just the gut feeling, if you will. I want to make sure that I have a good feeling about the person. So if you're on time, if you communicate properly, you've at least stacked half the deck in your favor. Now, the second half of it is going to be the background check. So do you have a criminal record? Do you have anything like that? If you have just arrived in Canada, well, you have the advantage of you're not going to have a criminal record. We know that if Canada has accepted you as a new migrant, that you're coming with a clean record, because if not, you would not have been accepted into Canada. So you've checked off that box. The next thing is, do you have references? Even if it is in a different country, is there somebody we can reach out to see that you've paid on time, that you've been a good tenant, that you haven't given any issues? If you're coming from somewhere that has a similar credit system to us, if you can show your credit report from where you're coming from, that might be held in your advantage. People are going to consider that if you had good payment habits in your previous country, you're probably going to have good payment habits here. The next thing is, if you don't have a credit report that you can show and that you don't have a lot of the things that most people or most landlords can be looking for, well, do you have savings? Show a bank statement that shows $10,000, whatever you have available to you, to showcase that you're going to be able to make the payments on this property and that the landlord has absolutely nothing to worry about. If you do have a job that you've already landed, show your letter of employment, show what your salary is going to be. The more you can provide to show that you have a well-funded and a complete dossier to be handing over to the person, the more likely they're going to feel comfortable making you their tenant, because we understand that everyone requires and needs a first chance in order to start life in Canada, but you want to make sure that you've stacked the deck in your favor and you've done everything you can to make sure that you get the apartment. These are some of the tips that I could do. The last thing, obviously, if you're really struggling to find a property, well, offer to give a security deposit. I know that it is illegal in Quebec, but if everybody's passing up on your application, you need a place to live, and the reality is you don't have the credit, you don't have the references, you don't have these things to showcase to make you a more solid candidate, then offer to give a security deposit. You're going to bet on yourself, right? You know you're going to make your payments, so why would you be concerned with giving the security deposit? So long as you make your payments, you're going to get your security deposit back at the end of it. So unfortunately, if you have no other way of proving that you have good payment habits, you're going to have to go down that road and make that your last resort, but at least you can secure a home, because at the end of the day, the most important part is having a home. So that just about wraps up my video on Montreal rentals and what you need to know in this market. My name again is LJ Aguinaga with LJ Realties. Please subscribe to the channel if you've gotten value from it, or at very least throw me a like. If you have any questions, did I miss anything, throw it in the comments down below. I always love reading the comments, and I try to respond to every single comment that I do get. Feel free to book a call with me directly. You have all my contact information down below. If you have questions about rental laws, the rental market, again, my biggest mission with this channel is to help educate, and my day-to-day with my brokerage, with my property management, with all of my real estate avenues, to help educate the public so that you guys can make the best decisions possible and to help you grow your portfolios and help you grow in your real estate career. So again, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next video.